There are parts of Utah where silence feels like a warning. My grandfather's old A-frame cabin sits in one of those places, 20 miles into the Wasatch Range, buried in trees, and cut off from everything except whatever decides to wander near it. I hadn't been there in 3 years, but my roommates Jake and Naomi begged for a weekend away before finals. We drove up on a freezing November afternoon. When we finally reached the private access road, something was wrong. A heavy chain normally stretched tight across the entrance, but today it sagged low, dragging in the dirt. I got out. The lock was still secured, but the bark of one pine tree had been torn away, as if something wrapped the chain tight and yanked until the link stretched. It looked deliberate. Jake shrugged from the passenger seat. Probably weather. Let's go, dude. My face is going numb. I wasn't convinced, but I unlocked the chain anyway. The feeling in my chest, that subtle instinct that something had crossed into a place it shouldn't started, right there. We reached the cabin at dusk. The woods had turned into a blue-black maze of aspens leaning in around the clearing. The cabin's dark silhouette was exactly as I remembered it. But when I opened the door, something hit me instantly. Bleach. Faint, but impossible to miss. A place sealed for years should smell like dust. Old wood, not chemicals. Did you hire someone to clean? Naomi asked. No, I said quietly. No one else has a key. Everything looked untouched, the old couch, the magazines, the antlers on the wall. But the air felt wrong. Too clean. Sanitized. Jake dropped his bag. You're overthinking it. Let's get a fire going before we freeze. I tried to push down the unease. While Jake and Naomi organized food, I went to the shed for firewood. It sat 50 yards behind the cabin near a dense pocket of aspens. I chopped wood for a few minutes, before the forest around me fell into a strange total stillness. Not quiet, silent, like someone pressed a mute button on the world. Then that feeling washed over me. Eyes. Watching. I turned, scanning the tree line. The aspen's white trunks, covered in dark oval eyes, stared back like 100 motionless witnesses. Something shifted behind them. A branch swayed, despite the wind being completely still. "Hello," I called out. My voice fell flat, swallowed by the cold. Nothing answered. "Whine." My voice fell flat. A squirrel shot up a nearby tree, and I exhaled so hard my knees almost buckled. I told myself it was just nerves and returned inside with the wood. But inside, tension had already surfaced. Naomi stood in the center of the living room, staring at the ceiling. Jake sat on the sofa, looking annoyed. She heard footsteps, he said. "Upstairs." "I know what footsteps sound like," Naomi whispered. These were boots. Heavy ones. The cabin loft sat above us, reached by a ladder. I climbed up with a flashlight. 2 mattresses, dusty curtains. Empty. "It's just the wood popping in the cold," I said. But even I didn't fully believe that. We tried to ease back into normalcy, made chili played cards, shared some whiskey. The fire warmed the place enough to loosen everyone's shoulders. For a little while it felt like a regular weekend trip. Then Jake went to the bathroom. 30 seconds later, what the hell, I rushed over. He was frozen in the doorway, staring at the small frosted window above the toilet. Someone had wiped away a jagged streak of frost from the outside, a finger-shaped smear in the cold glass. "Did you see someone?" I asked. "I saw a hand," he whispered. "Gray. Like there was no blood in it." I turned off every light. Naomi panicked. "Why are you? So we can see out," I whispered, "and they can't see in." We gathered in the dark kitchen, listening. Minutes passed thick with our breathing and the tick of cooling metal. Then a sound drifted from the front porch, a heavy thump. Then a dragging noise sliding across the wooden planks. Something large was moving toward the door. Naomi's hand shook as she grabbed her phone. "I'm calling, no service," I reminded her. The dragging stopped right in front of the door. A shadow blocked the thin line of moonlight beneath the frame. Then a voice spoke, low, distorted, like a recording malfunctioning. "Jake needs to finish." Jake's hand clamped onto my arm. "That's what I said to my professor last week," he whispered. Word for word. The voice shifted higher, warped. "I heard walking upstairs." Naomi's voice. Perfectly mimicked, except for the mechanical wrongness under it. This wasn't random. It had heard us, studied us. The doorknob turned, slowly, deliberately. The deadbolt held, but the knob rattled again violently, this time as if someone was testing the strength of the entire door. I crept to the window beside it and peeked through a sliver at the edge. A tall man stood on the porch. His parka was filthy, coated in sap and dirt, his head tilted toward the door in a strange, curious angle. When he turned, moonlight revealed a ski mask, poorly cut with the mouth opening stretched too wide. His jaw hung, slack, trembling. He cupped a hand around his mouth. Jake needs to finish. This time it wasn't distorted. It was identical. Perfect pitch. Perfect timing. My friend's voice coming out of a stranger wearing my grandfather's porch like a stage. I stumbled back. It's a man. He's insane. We need to run. Now. Front door's blocked, Naomi hissed. The back, I said. We jump the deck and make a run for the truck. Before we could move, the front window exploded inward. Something, maybe a rock or split log, flew through the glass, sending shards across the floor. That was enough. We ran. Burst through the back door, leapt off the deck, and sprinted around the cabin toward the driveway. My keys shook in my hand as I unlocked the Forerunner. The headlights blinked on and illuminated the man standing 20 feet in front of us. He wasn't wearing the parka anymore. He was wearing my flannel shirt, one I left in the cabin years ago. It stretched tight against his larger frame sleeves, halfway up his forearms. He smiled, an unnatural, too-wide smile, and raised a stiff hand in a slow wave. Jake shouted, "Run him over if you have to." I slammed the truck into drive. But he simply stepped aside. Calm. Unhurried. Watching. As if letting us leave wasn't a mistake, but part of whatever he'd been planning. We fishtailed down the dirt road until we hit pavement. None of us spoke until the truck stop lights appeared miles later. Only then did we breathe again. Only then did the fear truly settle in. By the time we reached the truck stop, the adrenaline that got us off that mountain had worn off, leaving something worse behind: clarity. The kind that lets you realize how close you came to something you weren't prepared to understand. We parked in the brightest part of the lot, under buzzing yellow lights. Naomi sat curled in the back seat, trembling. Jake stared straight ahead, hands shaking in his lap. I finally forced myself to dial 911. Trying to explain what happened felt surreal. I stuck to what couldn't be argued, with an intruder at the cabin, dangerous breaking windows, stalking us. I didn't mention the mimicry. Not yet. Not until someone else looked me in the eyes and told me they believed it too. Dispatch told us deputies were already en route and instructed us to wait at a diner in town. We drove the short distance in silence. Inside the diner was nearly empty. A few truckers sat scattered across booths. A dim jukebox droned old country music. The warmth and light should have been comforting, but all they did was highlight how shaken we really were. The waitress took one look at us and brought 3 glasses of water without asking anything. It took just over an hour for the deputies to arrive, 2 of them. One older, one young. The older deputy approached us with a tight, controlled expression. "You, the group from the cabin?" he asked. I nodded. He motioned for us to sit. We cleared the property. "Whoever you saw is gone. But we found signs that someone's been staying there a while." My breath caught. "Staying where?" Jake asked. "Crawl space," the deputy said. "Under the cabin." It felt like the floor fell out from under us. "I didn't even know there was a crawl space," Jake whispered. "I did," I muttered. "My grandpa mentioned it once. I never had a reason to go down there." The deputy pulled out a small notebook, flipping to a page. "There's a sleeping bag under there, some canned food, a bucket of bleach and rags." Naomi frowned. Bleach, I knew immediately why. "That's the smell inside," I whispered. The deputy nodded. "Yeah, someone's been cleaning. Wiping down surfaces." Seemed like he was maintaining the place. Jake blinked hard. Why would he clean it? The deputy paused, like he didn't want to say the next part. "That's not the worst of it," he finally said. "We found a notebook, too. A log. He's been writing down dates, times, things you all said. Some entries are from last week. Others from 3 years ago." A cold tremor ran through my chest. 3 years ago was the last time I had visited the cabin. So he, what? Watched me? I asked. The deputy leveled his eyes at me. According to these notes, he was observing you back then. Details about what you cooked, what shows you watched, conversations you had. Naomi covered her mouth. Her eyes shimmered with horror. The deputy flipped his notebook around so he could see his transcription of a page. Jagged handwriting. Repeated phrases. Phonetic attempts. What is this? Naomi whispered. Corrections, the deputy said. He labeled the pages that way. He'd write down something one of you said, then he'd rewrite it over and over, adjusting the pitch and inflection, like he was practicing speaking in your voices. Jake went pale. That's why he sounded exactly like me, and Naomi. The deputy nodded. He's been mimicking for a long time, years probably. I felt sick. Did he say why? The deputy took a slow breath. In the later entries, he wrote things like, feels empty without them. Family will come back. House is mine, now. Naomi froze. Family? He wasn't referring to his, the deputy said quietly. He meant you. A silence fell over our booth, a deep, suffocating one. Jake finally asked, did you find any signs he planned to hurt us? The deputy hesitated. We didn't find weapons, but we did find something that concerns me more. He flipped to another page in his notebook. In the crawl space right above where he'd been sleeping, he drilled small holes up through the floorboards, pencil-sized ones. They're positioned beneath the living room, kitchen, and bedroom. Naomi's eyes widened with dawning horror. So he could watch us, yes, the deputy said. Not clearly, but enough. Shadows, movement. He could hear everything perfectly. The room felt like it folded inward on itself. My mind replayed the image of all three of us sitting around the fire, laughing, unaware that someone lay beneath our feet, staring up through tiny holes drilled with care and patience. Jake swallowed hard. What about the footsteps Naomi heard? In the loft, the deputy exchanged a glance with the younger officer. We found fresh boot prints up there, he said. Wet ones. My skin crawled. You mean? While we were downstairs, I asked. Probably, he said. And when you went up to check, he was likely already back below the floorboards, moving around you, avoiding you. Almost like a game. He regretted the word choice instantly, but he wasn't wrong. That was exactly how it felt now that I replayed it. An orchestrated dance in the dark. Not random. Deliberate. Calculated. And the mimicry, I asked. Based on what we found. That wasn't improvisation. He practiced. For years. Trying to match voices he heard through the floor. I leaned back, the booth creaking under me. Is he dangerous? He's unstable, the deputy said. And he's been inside your cabin for a long time. That alone makes him dangerous. But he's also careful. He knows how to vanish. Jake exhaled shakily. He just watched us. He watched everything the deputy said. And he learned everything you said. Those words stayed with me long after the deputies left. We never returned to the cabin. I sold the land a month later for half its value, desperate to sever any tie to that place. But even after the sale, even after the keys were gone, the fear remained. There were nights in my apartment when I lay awake, thinking about the bleach smell. Thinking about him taking care of the space like he was preparing for our return. Thinking about how he didn't try to chase us when we ran. He stepped aside, smiling. Almost proud, because he didn't need to catch us. He already knew us. The deputy's final words follow me everywhere. When we entered the crawl space, he said above the sleeping bag written on the wall in pencil, there was one sentence repeated over and over, almost carved into the wood. He opened his notebook and showed us the transcription. I sound like them now. I still hear those words sometimes when the room gets too quiet. And I wonder if someone knocked on my door late at night and called my name in my own voice. Would I know the difference? Or would I open it? There are certain places so quiet, so far removed from the world, that you start to hear your own thoughts echo back at you. I didn't know how dangerous that could be until I booked a week inside a luxury glass house called the Prism, a place designed to make you experience isolation, according to the listing. I'm a structural engineer in Seattle, and by October that year, burnout didn't even begin to describe what I was feeling. I wanted silence. I wanted cold air. I wanted to be somewhere far enough from the city that notifications and deadlines felt like myths. The listing looked perfect. A minimalist cube made of one-way mirrored glass perched on a cliff in the Alpine Lakes wilderness. During the day, the house blended into the forest so seamlessly, it looked like it wasn't even there. At night, it turned into something else entirely. I drove 4 miles down a rough fire road before the trees finally opened into a clearing. When I first stepped out of my Jeep, the Prism didn't even look real. Its perfect reflective walls mirrored the trees back at me like the forest had grown a pair of eyes. The owner, someone named Marcus, texted me a lock code and a single message. Enjoy the silence. Don't fight the outward focus. It didn't register as strange at the time. Inside the house was everything the listing promised. Sleek, modern, silent. That first evening, I sat in an Eames chair with a glass of wine and watched the sun bleed into the treetops. The light hit the glass walls just right, and for a moment it felt like I was floating above the valley. But the second the sun dipped below the horizon, I learned something nobody thinks about when imagining a glass house. At night, you don't look out. You look at yourself. But something outside can see you perfectly. Inside, with the lights on, the walls became giant mirrors. Outside, the forest turned into a black void where anything or anyone could stand and watch. My reflection was the only thing staring back at me, faint and uneasy. Around 9 p.m., I was making a sandwich when the lights flickered. Not a random glitch, a rhythmic flicker. Off, on, off, on. I froze with the knife in my hand. Then everything stabilized. I tried to dismiss it. Smart homes are notorious for buggy wiring. Still, something about that pattern felt intentional. I checked the home's control tablet mounted on the wall. System status, all systems normal motion sensors, perimeter clear. That helped. A little. By midnight, exhaustion forced me into bed. The bedroom sat in the center of the house with a skylight directly above the mattress. I fell asleep, watching stars drift overhead. At 3:33 a.m., I woke up with my heart already pounding. No dream. No noise. Just a feeling like something had reached into my sleep and yanked me out. The clouds outside had swallowed the stars. The room was pitch black. Then, I heard it. A fingernail, gently clicking against glass. It came from the living room. I told myself it was a branch, even though the air was dead still. I grabbed my heavy flashlight and stepped into the hallway. The tapping grew clearer, deliberate, paused, deliberate again. When I turned the corner, the sound stopped. I swept my flashlight across the glass wall. The beam cut through my reflection and lit up the trees, but nothing moved. No animals. No person. "Is anyone there?" I called out. My voice echoed inside the cube. No response. I tried to turn away. That's when something slammed against the glass right behind me. Bang! The entire pane vibrated. I spun around, screaming, but there was nothing. I ran to the control tablet. Again it read motion sensors perimeter clear, how I whispered. I ended up sitting on the couch the rest of the night, knife in one hand, flashlight in the other. Every few minutes, I expected a face to suddenly press against the glass, but the forest stayed silent until dawn. When morning finally broke, I stepped outside to look for footprints. The mud around the house was untouched. No prints, no disturbances. I almost convinced myself I imagined everything until I looked up. About 12 feet above the ground, near the top edge of the glass wall, was a handprint. 5 fingers. A full palm. Smudged grease. And it was on the inside. My stomach dropped. I ran back into the house, grabbed a ladder from the utility closet, and climbed up. The handprint was real oily, unmistakable, and definitely not mine. Someone had been climbing inside the structural beams. Someone had been inside the house with me. Panic surged. I sprinted to the bedroom to pack. I didn't care about the rental fee, I just wanted out. I threw everything into my bag and reached for my car keys on the nightstand. Gone. Empty pockets. Empty counter. Nowhere. Instead, sitting dead center on the kitchen island was a Polaroid. Fresh chemical scent, still sharp. It was a photo of me. taken from above in the living room, looking down at me as I sat on the couch, gripping my knife and flashlight during the night. The realization hit me so hard I staggered. While I was staring at the forest, the real threat was above me the entire time. I bolted for the door. I punched in the code. Access denied. I tried again. Access denied. System lockdown initiated. A moment later, the ceiling speakers crackled alive. A man's voice, not Marcus. Calm. Raspy. Amused. "You didn't read the rules, Anthony." The listing said, "Experience the isolation." We haven't even started yet. All around me, the motorized blackout blinds began sliding shut, slowly, completely, sealing every wall. By the time the last sliver of daylight disappeared, I understood exactly what he meant. I wasn't alone. I was in the box with him. The moment the blackout blinds sealed shut, the house transformed into something unrecognizable. No reflections. No forest. No sky. Just pitch black walls and the faint trembling cone of my flashlight. The silence wasn't silence anymore. It was pressure, like the house itself was holding its breath. "Marcus," I yelled. "Who the hell are you? Let me out." The speakers crackled. A low, rasping chuckle slid through the dark. "Marcus isn't here, Anthony. Marcus owns the house. I'm the one who lives in the ceiling." A heavy, wet thud came from the hallway. Then, the unmistakable sound of bare feet slapping slowly against the polished concrete floor. I turned toward the sound, holding out the knife in a shaking hand. "I have a weapon," I shouted. A whisper drifted from somewhere inside the darkness, this time not from the speakers. "You're shaking, Anthony." He was in the room. I whipped the flashlight toward the voice. The beam swept across the blinds, then landed on something that froze my blood. A reflection, but not mine. A man crouched low behind the sofa, pale, thin, almost animalistic. His skin was streaked with gray grease. His eyes reflected the light like a feral cat's. The second the beam touched him, he scuttled out of view with inhuman speed. I didn't wait. I ran for the utility closet. I knew the breaker panel was inside. If I could kill the power, maybe the locks would fail. I dove into the pantry and slammed the door shut, flipping the cheap privacy lock with trembling fingers. It wouldn't stop him, but it gave me a few seconds. I shined the flashlight on the wall until I found the breaker box. I flipped every switch main, HVAC security lighting. The house died around me. Absolute silence. Then a giggle. Low. Delighted. "Smart boy. But you forgot something." An axe blade split through the pantry door inches from my face, sending a spray of splinters across my shirt. I stumbled backward as the blade pulled out and slammed again. A hand, thin, filthy fingers, slick with grease, pushed through the broken wood, fumbling for the lock. Adrenaline took over. Without thinking, I kicked the door as hard as I could. My heel slammed into his wrist. He screamed a raw, animalistic shriek that shook the tiny room. "You broke my wrist," he howled. "You broke it. I didn't stay to apologize." With the door weakened from his strikes, I barreled into its shoulder first. It burst open, and I stumbled into the kitchen. The flashlight beam hit him full on. He wasn't a monster. He wasn't supernatural. He was a man, starved, filthy eyes, wild with mania, but unmistakably human. Human, and furious. With his good hand, he raised the axe and lunged at me. He swung clumsily due to the broken wrist, but the force was still enough to bury the blade into the marble countertop, inches from my ribs. I slammed into him, driving him to the floor. We rolled across the concrete in the flickering beam of my displaced flashlight. He bit my ear hard enough to draw blood. I felt it run down my neck, warm and slick. I grabbed the flashlight, reversed my grip, and brought the heavy metal end down on his skull. His body went limp. I scrambled away from him, chest heaving, ears ringing. I snatched the axe from the counter, gripping it with white knuckles. The door hadn't unlocked. When I cut the power, the house was fail secure. The electronic deadbolt stayed locked without electricity. My eyes shot to the glass wall. The blinds were down, but a thin, visible seam showed me exactly where to hit. I swung the axe. The blade tore open the blind. The axe slammed into the thick safety glass. It spiderwebbed the pane, but didn't break. I swung again, and again, Every blow echoed through the house like a gunshot. Behind me, I heard a groan. He was waking up. Panic fueled me. I slammed the blunt end into the center of the cracked glass until the entire section gave way and collapsed outward into the cold night. I climbed through the jagged opening, cutting my hands and knees on the shards, but I didn't stop. I bolted toward my Jeep. I smashed my own window with the axe handle. I still didn't have my keys and hot-wired the ignition. The engine roared to life. As I slammed the Jeep into reverse, the headlights swept across the house. He was standing in the broken opening I'd made. Blood matted his hair. His broken wrist hung at a sick angle. He watched me, not running, not screaming, just watching. He raised his good hand and pointed at me. I floored it, tires skidding on wet gravel as I tore down the mountain road. I don't remember most of that drive. I know I almost spun off the cliff twice. I know I was screaming the whole way down without realizing it. I didn't stop until I reached the ranger station 20 miles away. When police returned to the Prism, the man was gone, but they found where he lived. Above the bathroom, inside the ceiling void, he had built a nest insulation for bedding, old wiring rigged into monitors that connected to the house's security cameras. He had been watching every guest. The police also found photos, hundreds of Polaroids, of couples, families, solo renters, all taken from the rafters, all taken while they slept. But the worst part wasn't the photos. It wasn't even the hidden nest. It was the journal. He wrote detailed notes on each guest, rating them like entries in some deranged experiment. When they showed me the page with my name, my blood ran cold. Anthony 8/10, fights back, good sport, let him go. We'll play again later. The police never caught him. I moved out of Seattle. Now I live in a second-floor apartment. No skylights, no glass walls, no smart home anything. Every night before I sleep, I check the attic hatch. I installed a padlock on it myself, because sometimes when the building settles late at night, I swear I hear it again. That gentle, rhythmic tapping, like a fingernail on glass. If you look at a map of the Boundary Waters Canoe area in Minnesota, it looks like someone took a hammer to a mirror. It's a shattered landscape of thousands of lakes, dense pine forests, and rocky outcrops. It is one of the few places left in America where you can travel for weeks and not see another human soul. I am a writer. It's a cliche. I know the writer retreating to the woods to finish his novel. But I wasn't there for inspiration. I was there for the deadline. I needed to finish, and I needed zero distractions. I rented a cabin on a private island in the middle of Seagull Lake. It was accessible only by boat in the summer, or by snowmobile across the ice in the winter. It was January. The ice was 3 feet thick. The cabin was beautiful in a rugged way. Rough-hewn logs, a massive stone fireplace, and a silence so deep it felt like pressure in your ears. The owner, an old friend of my father named Mr. Henderson, warned me that the place had quirks. The pipes groan, he had told me as he handed over the keys, and the wind coming off the lake sounds like screaming sometimes. Don't let it spook you. I laughed it off. I didn't believe in ghosts. The first 3 days were perfect. I wrote 5 chapters. I drank coffee by the fire. I watched the snow fall. On the 4th day, the temperature plummeted to 30 below zero. The cabin groaned the wood, contracting in the brutal cold. I was in the kitchen making soup when I heard it. It was coming from behind the refrigerator. Mice, I muttered. I grabbed a broom and banged on the wall. Get out of there. The scratching stopped immediately. I went back to stirring my soup. Knock, knock, knock. I froze. That wasn't a mouse. That was a knuckle rapping on wood. And it wasn't behind the fridge anymore. It was coming from the floorboards directly beneath my feet. I stepped back, staring at the floor. The cabin didn't have a basement, at least not that Henderson had mentioned. It was built on a crawlspace foundation. I got down on my hands and knees, pressing my ear to the white pine planks. Silence. Hello, I felt ridiculous saying it. From beneath the floor, a voice whispered back. It was muffled, sounding like it was traveling through thick insulation. Cold. Just that one word. I scrambled up my heart, hammering against my ribs. I grabbed the fire poker, my weapon of choice apparently, and stood in the center of the room. Was it a radio? Was there a squatter underneath the cabin? I put on my heavy parka and boots, grabbed a high-powered lantern, and went outside. The wind was howling, kicking up spindrifts of snow. I circled the foundation of the cabin. It was skirted with stone and lattice, but there was a small access door on the north side secured with a rusted padlock. The padlock was intact, rusted shut. There was no way anyone had gone in or out of there recently without bolt cutters. The snow around the door was smooth, unbroken drifts. No footprints. It's just the wind, I told myself. Wind rushing through the vents. Pareidolia. My brain is making words out of noise. I went back inside and locked the door. I turned up the radio to drown out the silence. That night I woke up at 2:00 a.m. The fire had died down to embers. The cabin was freezing. I could see my breath in the air. I rolled over to get up and add a log to the fire, but I stopped. Across the room near the bookshelf, a shadow was standing. It wasn't a person. It was too tall, too lanky. It looked like a coat rack draped in heavy fabrics, but I didn't own a coat rack. I blinked, rubbing my eyes. The shadow remained. "Who's there?" I called out, my voice trembling. The shadow didn't move, but the bookshelf next to it did. Slowly, silently, the massive oak bookshelf swung outward, away from the wall. It wasn't just a shelf, it was a door. Revealed behind it was a dark, gaping hole in the wall, a secret room. I reached for the lamp on my nightstand and clicked it on. The sudden light blinded me for a second. When my eyes adjusted, the shadow was gone, but the bookshelf was still open. I sat there for a full minute, unable to move. A secret room. Henderson hadn't mentioned a secret room. I grabbed the fire poker again and approached the opening. The air coming from the dark space was stale and smelled of rot and old earth. I shone the flashlight inside. It wasn't a room. It was a staircase. A narrow wooden staircase descending steeply into the earth, far deeper than the crawl space should allow. I should have run. I should have grabbed my keys, jumped on the snowmobile, and sped across the ice back to civilization. But curiosity is a dangerous thing, and part of me, the rational part, thought maybe someone was hurt down there. Maybe Henderson had a bunker and someone was trapped. I took a step down. The stairs creaked. Is anyone down here? The beam of my light cut through the gloom. At the bottom of the stairs, about 10 feet down, there was a dirt floor and a single wooden chair facing the corner. And on the walls, I walked down my dread, growing with every step. The walls of this subterranean room were covered in photos. They were Polaroids, hundreds of them taped to the dirt and the wooden supports. I stepped closer to inspect them. They were photos of the cabin, photos of the lake, photos of the front door. But the most recent ones, they were photos of me. Me walking from the snowmobile. Me chopping wood. Me sitting at the typewriter. My blood turned to ice. These weren't taken with a telephoto lens from the woods. The angles were close, intimate. One photo showed me sleeping in my bed. It was dated yesterday. I spun around, panic seizing my chest. I needed to get out. As I turned toward the stairs, I saw it. In the corner of the room, hidden in the shadows where the light hadn't fully reached, was a pile of rags. Except the pile of rags started to rise. It stood up, unfolding itself. It was a man wrapped in layers of filthy burlap and animal skins. He was impossibly thin, his face hidden behind a mask made of deer skull and twine. He stood between me and the stairs. He tilted his head, the antlers of the deer skull scraping against the low ceiling. "You found the gallery," he rasped. His voice was the same one I had heard through the floor. "Do you like the art?" I gripped the poker. "Get out of my way." He laughed, a dry, wheezing sound. "You think you're the renter, Charles, but you're not. You're the model." He took a step toward me. I swung the poker, wild screaming, hoping to back him off. He didn't flinch. He just watched me through the empty sockets of the bone mask. Then from the top of the stairs, the entrance to the bedroom, I heard a heavy metal clank. I looked up. The bookshelf was swinging shut. "No," I screamed, lunging for the stairs. I was too late. The heavy oak unit slammed into place, the latch clicking with a sound of finality. I was trapped in the earth. With him. The latch clicked, and the heavy oak bookshelf sealed into the wall with a thud that vibrated through the floorboards. The darkness was instant and absolute, save for the solitary beam of my flashlight, which was shaking violently in my hand. I was trapped in a box of dirt and cold air roughly 10 feet by 10 feet with a monster. I swung the beam back to the corner where the man had been standing. He was gone. "Where are you?" I screamed, backing up until my spine hit the damp earth of the wall. I swung the light frantically left and right. The room was empty. Then I heard a sound that made my stomach turn over. It was the sound of a match being struck. A tiny flame erupted in the opposite corner, illuminating the deer skull mask. He was crouching behind an old wooden workbench I hadn't noticed before. He touched the match to a kerosene lantern. A sickly yellow light flooded the room, casting long skeletal shadows against the photos taped to the walls. "Don't scream, Charles," he whispered, standing up slowly. "It ruins the composition." He picked up a camera from the workbench. It was an old Polaroid, bulky and black. He raised it to his face. The flash blinded me for a second. "Open the door," I commanded, raising the iron poker. "Open it, or I swear to God I'll kill you." He chuckled, a dry rattling sound. "The door only opens from the bedroom side, Charles. It's a gravity latch. We are in the belly now. There is no way out, but down." Down, I looked at the floor. In the center of the room, under a frayed rug, I saw the outline of a trapdoor. He lunged. He moved with a speed that defied his emaciated frame. He didn't come at me with a weapon. He came at me with a rag. It smelled of chloroform and old sweat. I swung the poker. It connected with his shoulder with a sickening crunch of bone, but he didn't even cry out. He slammed into me, driving me into the dirt wall. The flashlight flew from my hand. We grappled in the dirt. He was incredibly strong, his grip like a vice. I could feel the cold, smooth bone of the deer mask pressing against my cheek as he tried to force the rag over my nose and mouth. "Breathe," he hissed. "Just breathe." I bit his hand. Hard. I tasted copper and filth. He jerked back, howling, and I used the moment to knee him in the groin. He crumpled to the side. I scrambled away, gasping for air. I grabbed the lantern he had lit. The trapdoor, I thought. Down. If the bookshelf was sealed, the trapdoor was the only variable. I kicked the rug aside and yanked on the iron ring. It was heavy, frozen shut, but adrenaline gave me strength I didn't know I had. With a grunt, I heaved it open. A blast of freezing air hit me. It was significantly colder than the basement. Below was a narrow tunnel shored up, with rotting timber leading away into the darkness. "You can't leave," the man shrieked. He was getting up, grabbing a rusted hammer from the workbench. I didn't hesitate. I jumped into the hole. It was a slide. I hit a slick patch of ice and dirt and slid uncontrollably downwards, tumbling into the dark. I slid for maybe 20 feet before I leveled out into a crawl space that was barely 3 feet high. I held the lantern up. The tunnel was carved directly through the earth and rock. I heard the man drop into the hole behind me. "I know these tunnels, Charles. I dug them." I crawled. I crawled on my hands and knees, dragging the lantern, scraping my back against the jagged rocks of the ceiling. The air was frigid, deadly cold. I realized then where this tunnel led. It was heading towards the lake. It was an old smuggler's tunnel or an ice harvest chute. Behind me, I heard him scuttling like a crab. He was fast. "Come back," he yelled, his voice echoing and distorting in the tight space. I saw a faint blue light ahead. I scrambled faster, my breath coming in ragged clouds. The tunnel ended at a wooden grate. I smashed the lantern against it, shattering the glass and the wood. I kicked the debris away and squeezed through. I fell out onto the ice. I was underneath the cabin's massive wraparound deck facing the frozen expanse of Seagull Lake. The wind was roaring, now a blizzard, kicking up whiteout conditions. I scrambled out from under the deck and ran. The snow was knee-deep. I fell, got up, fell again. I headed for the snowmobile parked at the dock. I glanced back at the cabin. The man was squeezing out of the hole under the deck. He stood up in the snow, the deer skull mask stark white against the darkness of the wood. He held the hammer in one hand and the camera in the other. He didn't chase me. He just stood there. I reached the snowmobile. My hands were so frozen I could barely turn the key. "Come on! Come on!" The engine sputtered, then roared to life. I gunned the throttle, the track spinning on the ice before catching. I sped away across the frozen lake, the wind biting into my exposed face like needles. I didn't look back until I was a mile out. When I did, the cabin was just a small dark shape against the tree line. but I saw a flash. A single bright pop of light. He had taken one last photo. I made it to the ranger station at 4:00 a.m. I was hypothermic and raving about a man in the walls. They took me to the hospital in Grand Marais. 2 days later, the state police went to the island. They found the cabin. They found the bookshelf. They found the secret room. But the tunnel had been collapsed. Someone had pulled the support beams, burying the passage in tons of rock and earth. And the man, gone. But the police found something that made them open a federal case. The photos on the wall, there were hundreds of them. They identified faces of people who had gone missing in the Boundary Waters as far back as the 1,980 seconds. Hikers, fishermen, loners like me. Mr. Henderson, the owner, was brought in for questioning. He swore he knew nothing about the room. He was 80 years old, frail, and terrified. He said his grandfather built the place, and he rarely visited. He was cleared. But here's the part that keeps me awake. The part that makes me check the back seat of my car and lock my windows even in the summer heat. The police gave me my personal effects back, which they had recovered from the main room of the cabin. My laptop, my clothes, my wallet. Tucked inside my wallet, they found a Polaroid. It wasn't one of the ones from the wall. It was new. The chemical smell was still faint on it. The photo was of me sleeping in my hospital bed in Grand Marais. The angle was from directly above, as if someone had been clinging to the drop-ceiling tiles looking down. On the white border of the photo, in jagged, frantic handwriting, were 3 words, the final chapter. He didn't stay on the island. He followed me. And somewhere out there in the dark, he's still curating his gallery.